Hi there, Craig Wilkinson, and welcome to another leg in the journey of Dangerous But Good. I'm joined by a wonderful guest who I've known for just over a year now. We worked together a bit, all the way from New York, and Malaak, Compton-Rock. Wonderful to have her on board. She runs a non-profit organization called Angelrock, which does amazing work in South Africa. And it's wonderful to have an American with a heart for Africa coming here and doing phenomenal work. Malaak, so welcome and thank you for your time. I know you got a very short space of time in and out.
Yeah, in and out this trip, but thank you so much for having me.
It's
so
a
glad
pleasure.
to be here.
And you're a bit jet lagged, so
I'm so jet lagged. So I will make it through this podcast.
I'm sure you will. Well, you got so much great stuff to say. I've just loved working with you this is the second year around, and what is it? 200 boys from Diepsloot.
Mm-hmm.
How many girls?
400.
400. So 600,
Yeah, 600
youth
kids
from Diepsloot, and you just do the most amazing work in this very, very underserviced area, and with an education system that often doesn't do justice to the kind of brightness of the kids that are in the system.
Certainly does not.
Yeah. What motivated? Well, firstly, what brought you to Africa? I mean, you've got some African blood in your home, having adopted a young South African child many years back.
Many years ago. She's 16 now,
Wow.
but she came to the United States when she was 9 months.
Yeah.
So she calls herself the true African American in the family. But, long before she was even thought of, and long before I had her sisters, she has 2 older sisters, I came to the continent.
Right.
I think as an African American in the United States, we are brought up to be very connected to our roots,
Right.
a true understanding that we are descendants of slaves. As you know, I think one reason why African Americans have an affinity to South Africa is that our histories are so similar
Right.
in terms of the degradation of Black people.
Right.
And so I first went to West Africa because of the connection of the slave trade and wanting to just explore. But I think what was a catalyst for my work on the continent was going to work for UNICEF, which is an amazing NGO that of the United Nations that specifically works on behalf of the world's most vulnerable children.
Right.
And I came from public relations and marketing in very different fields. But when I was hired by them, they wanted me to basically do the same thing. They wanted me to promote UNICEF in America so that people would support the organization. And the way I did that was by partnering with our UNICEF ambassadors, which are well-known people who go and see UNICEF projects in the field and come back and talk about it in the media. So that was my job. And one particular visit was with the actor Lawrence Fishburne. And Lawrence was
Matrix
exactly
fame. Yeah.
of Matrix fame. Lawrence was in the movie Apocalypse Now when he was a kid. He lied and said he was 18 to get into the movie, but he was really only 13.
Wow.
And that's a big war movie.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I always did with our ambassadors was say to them, what's your particular philanthropic platform? Like, what do you want to do? Because you need to promote something that resonates with you. And so
Picking on their conscience there.
Yeah. And so because of that film and all those years later, how a war movie resonated with him, he said, I want to help child soldiers.
Oh, wow.
So off we went to West Africa, to Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Ivory Coast to basically witness UNICEF's amazing work bringing child soldiers out of the field, giving them psychosocial counseling and reunifying them with their parents.
My goodness. Because the woundedness and the psychological damage must be enormous. In those kids.
Enormous. And so we were in Monrovia in a burnout church, and UNICEF was using it to teach school. They have this incredible tool called School in a Box. It comes in every language, and it has supplies to teach a child anywhere, under a tree, on the street, or in a burned out church. And so we're watching this, and we had been on the continent for maybe 4 or 5 days, and it was a very difficult trip, as you can imagine, emotionally difficult, draining trip. So at one point, Lawrence and I went outside just to gather ourselves, and all of a sudden we're talking, and all of a sudden I feel something under my legs, and I look down at this little girl. She walked under my legs, she turned around, looked me in the eyes, and she said, "Please, ma'am, I need peace, not war. Please, ma'am, help us have peace, not war. And that little girl, so the tears just finally, fell.
Yeah.
But, I often wish that little girl knew she changed the trajectory of my life, because it was at that moment that I said, okay, if I'm blessed enough, I'm going to work on behalf of the girl child.
So she was a real godsend.
She was a godsend.
Yeah.
She was a godsend.
Fantastic. That's amazing. I mean, I wanted to ask you the difference between being in the beauty and the entertainment industry, which tends to be quite superficial and skin deep and image conscious, compared to working with UNICEF and in Africa with ex-boy soldiers. I mean, that's a major change.
It is a major change.
Was it inspired by that incident mainly?
So that incident, no, it was inspired by first entertainment industry, then the beauty industry, realizing that I loved PR, realizing that I loved marketing, and I still use those skills even on behalf of my own organization. But how can I use those skills for good, right? And so, but what was interesting is that when UNICEF hired me and they said, but you're going to be working with our ambassadors who are all celebrities, I was like, oh, wow, did I really, move? But yes, I did, because there is such a difference when you work with someone who's well-known, who is working on a movie set, promoting something, versus someone who knows that by virtue of their fame, they have the ability to change a life. And they're completely different people. Yeah. They're bringing their best, most honest, deep self to the work.
I love
and
it.
So it made a big difference.
Well, I mean, this is all about using your power for good. I mean, there are two elements of that. One is to grow your power, because we can only impact the world to the extent that we have the ability to impact the world, which means we need power. And it might be fame, it might be fortune, it might be money, it might be a particular gifting we have, a position and influence. But, one has to use that. I mean, how many celebrities do you think have a social conscience and a willingness to use their platform and their power for good?
I would say in the United States, it's quite linked.
Right.
It's quite linked. I think there is an understanding to whom much is given, much is required.
Right.
And the philanthropy landscape in the United States is so incredibly different than South Africa. Yeah. I'm learning the hard way.
You would say there's more of a heart to give?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Americans are, we have a lot of issues, particularly right now, but Americans are the greatest philanthropists in the world.
Amazing.
And when I talk about philanthropy, the difference is that when people hear that word, they automatically think rich. That's not the case. The number one givers in America are the average, basic, normal people with normal jobs who just know that if they give $5 a month or $10 a month or $15 a month, they can help. I tell people all the time when it comes to philanthropy, there's a handful of Oprah Winfrey's and Bill Gates, and what makes philanthropy go around is the average everyday person who realizes that they have something to give, whether it's, again, $5, $10, $15, or their time volunteering. We have a very big volunteer culture in America. So I think when you become a celebrity and you understand that you have a platform, yes, I do believe a lot of well-known people want to use that platform for good, for sure.
Fantastic. So I mean, your personal life, your growth in your ability to have an impact. How would you say you've gone about increasing your personal power and your ability to have an impact? I want to talk then about what the work you're doing, because you're using your power for good, whatever that. But as an individual, as an African American woman, growing up, you grew up in New York, I presume. I know.
No, I actually grew up in California.
Oh, California. Okay. To New York now. Personal power is important, isn't it? Your ability to impact the world. What would you say about, as an individual, growing the ability to have an impact on the world?
I think, again, I was fortunate to grow up in a type of household that expected you to give back. I also, was born in the late 60s, so I had parents who were activists, civil rights, activists
was big
in that time. Talking about issues around the kitchen table. That's the kind of household that I grew up in. I didn't grow up, obviously, I told you the careers I chose. I didn't grow up thinking I was going to go into nonprofit at all. Right. But I did grow up with a deep understanding of what it meant to be a volunteer, what it meant to care about the least amongst us.
To give back.
What it meant to give back. Yeah. So that part I knew. I grew up reading the books of a wonderful African-American woman by the name of Marian Wright Edelman, who started the Children's Defense Fund. Which is in the United States our preeminent child protection organization. Right. And she came out of Dr. King's movement. She was a lawyer for Dr. King. She was the first lawyer for the NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, which came out of civil rights. So she's a true icon. Hillary Clinton, when she was in college, interned for Marian Wright Edelman, and as soon as she graduated, went to go work. That was her first job at the Children's Defense Fund, and then she was a board member. Right. Well, she writes books, and she writes just incredible books about why we have to invest in children. And I used to read her books. And she was the only person, like that's who I consider like, oh my God, if I could ever one day meet Marian Wright Edelman. And because of my work with UNICEF and some of the advocacy work that I had to do in D.C. on the Hill, advocating and pushing for laws to be changed on behalf of children, I had an opportunity to meet her. And years later, I get a call one day. She graduated from Yale. Black woman graduated from Yale a long time ago.
And that wasn't so common.
That was not common at all. Yeah. To meet her in New York City at the Yale Club for lunch, and she asked me to join the board of the Children's Defense Fund, this organization that I had been looking up to since I was a child. And I'm still on the board. I'm actually leaving the board in December after many, many, many years. It's time for me to move on. But she is my guiding light, my role model, as it pertains to understanding. My motto in life is her motto. Service is the rent we pay for living.
Service is the rent we pay for living. I love that.
Yeah. And the understanding that if we don't invest in our children, what world are we going to have? There's no future. Yeah. So when you put those two things together, I try to use whatever influence, whatever power, if you want to call that, whatever you want to call it, on behalf of uplifting the most vulnerable.
Fantastic. Love it. I mean, look, to be honest, and that's why the word dangerous is such a misconstrued word. I mean, you think of dangerous as something negative and bad, and it generally is.
Yeah. I use the word disrupt. And some people don't even like disrupt. Right. But I'm all about disrupting.
Fantastic. I mean, look, we have to be, if the Allied forces hadn't stood up against the Nazis, where would we be?
Yeah.
If the civil rights movement hadn't stood up against Jim Crow, where would we be? Evil exists in the world.
Yes.
The world is full of battles that we need to fight. Have you found any similarity between the kind of evils in society and battles that need to be fought here in South Africa and the United States?
Of course. Again, our histories are so similar.
Right.
When people say to me that they don't understand why South Africa hasn't gotten itself together since reconciliation, right? Why are there so many social ills left over from that time? I'm like, are you kidding me? The apartheid was yesterday compared to slavery. Yeah. And look at what's happening in the United States right now. Yeah. Look how polarized we are.
Incredible. More than...
I mean, look how long... Look how right now in my country... Every single law that was passed to protect Black people, given our history, is now being rolled back. Our Supreme Court is filled with nothing but conservatives who don't believe in any type of diversity and equity and inclusion. They don't believe in they don't believe in even teaching about our history. We have governors who are basically saying, you can't say the word Martin Luther King in school. You can't say the word Rosa Parks in school. That is happening right now.
It's crazy.
We have a new person running for vice president who has basically said, if I win, there will never be any more DEI in any public university, public school in America.
So, if we don't learn from our history, we're destined to repeat it.
Of course we are.
As simple as that.
But there are certain forces in the United States who do want to repeat it.
Right.
They actually do. And that's why, they're dismantling everything that we thought our country stood for.
Right.
But now, as a Black person in America, I'm realizing,
there's still battles to be fought.
Yeah.
Someone once said that we think that peace is a natural state of humanity, and sadly it's not, because there are always forces fighting against that. I mean, we had a bit of a conversation before we started this chat around the kind of things that you are dangerous to. You mentioned one, which was GBV, gender-based violence.
Yes.
Talk a bit more about. South Africa is known as the rape capital of the world, as you know.
Of course.
But this is an issue in the US as well, the gender-based violence issue.
It is, but nowhere near.
Nowhere near here.
No, not even in the same stratosphere. As a matter of fact, I don't even think in America you even hear anybody use that term.
GBV. If you say GBV, they wouldn't understand what you're saying.
They wouldn't even know what that was.
Right.
They wouldn't even know what that was.
So how do we become a danger to that here in South Africa? I mean, that's a passion of mine. Our organization does a lot of work, as you know, and that's, I think, why you invited us to work with you, to teach, especially young boys, positive, healthy masculinity that would never, ever abuse but stand against that. How do we become dangerous to that?
That's why I do the work that I do. And by the way, that, working in the GBV field is not my necessary area of expertise. Yeah. But I work in the education field because I believe deeply that education is the only way out of poverty. There is no other way.
Well, that's what Madiba said.
Ultimate
Mandela
equalizer.
Said that.
It's the ultimate equalizer. So I invest the majority of my time on the continent working in the education space, right? Especially in a country like South Africa where your education system is so broken. Yeah. It's so incredibly unequal. And it's so broken. Yeah. And you are not even teaching kids enough to be successful in life, right? Your standards of what you feel is okay to graduate
sets a kid up for failure for life.
Sets a kid up for failure for life. Yeah. So our organization is about coming in and saying, no, we're not teaching you to the South African standards. We're teaching you to the global standards, okay? And college is in your trajectory. And a good paying job is in your trajectory. You stick with us, we're going to...
There is hope. There is a future.
There's going to be hope. But what happens when you work with children as poor as ours and children who live in a community like Deep Slit, if you don't address the other social ills, it is impossible to do the work that you want to do, right? So we were almost forced to start working as it pertains to ensuring that our girls were kept safe. They understood what GBV was. They understood what grooming was. They understood what all the different types of activities fall under and behaviors fall under GBV. Right. We had to start working in, the gender equality space, making sure they understood their human rights as a female, right? What they, just by being born, what they deserved and what they didn't deserve. Right. We got into food and nutrition because you can't expect a child to learn and be available to us after school. We see our kids 6 days a week. They're only home 1 day a week. And we now may even take them on that 7th day we talked about. And so we had to fill their bellies and fill the bellies of the people in their household, right? Because if everybody doesn't have this opportunity, you want the people in the households to be supportive of this opportunity, not jealous of this opportunity because you're getting something that they aren't. So you bring the whole family along as it pertains to that. We have a social worker on staff because we have to deal with the psychosocial issues of the counseling, of the violence that the trauma and the PTSD, exactly. So that's why our education program, and it is, but it's become so holistic and integrated and really dealing with the whole child. That's how we see success in the classroom.
Well, fantastic.
So basically, when you look at the statistics, which are just horrific.
The statistics around education.
Around education, but also around GBV. Right. Right. When you look at how violent the societies they're growing up on, it was almost like, okay, well, Malaak, if you have the capacity, you have to try to touch more lives. Right. And I've been able to do that through partnerships, though, right? Yeah. This is all collaborative work. It's all collaborative.
You're
work.
like the conductor that, leads the orchestra.
Yeah. But I mean, I believe that GBV is a cause of a lifetime in South Africa. And if this country doesn't understand that, then there is absolutely no way to end poverty ever, if you don't get a handle. I was recently saying to somebody, and I wonder if you agree with me on this, because I'm looking through American eyes.
Yes.
But obviously in the work that I did, previous to doing this work, I did a lot of work in the HIV/AIDS space too, because obviously when you work on the continent, you have to
deal with whatever the issues are.
What the issues are. So when the world, and I've done a lot of work with the One Organization and Product Red, when the world understood that if everybody didn't get engaged, that generations of populations in Africa were just going to die, right? It's the one thing that I always say. I'm very liberal and I'm a Democrat. However, my favorite Republican president, believe it or not, is George Bush.
Okay.
The second
Senior
one.
or the junior?
The second one.
Yeah.
Because the second is the one who started and funded PEPFAR, which is how ARV drugs and medication has gotten all over the continent and saved millions of lives. For that, even though there's other things that he did that I didn't quite like, I'm a friend of George Bush.
Right.
And so when that started to happen, I saw with my own eyes the government of South Africa say, okay, we're going to admit that this is an epidemic. We're going to put dollars behind advertising. We're going to put dollars behind training. We're going to put dollars behind education to try and bring this burden down. Now, you still have the highest HIV/AIDS burden in the world, but people are at least living.
Right.
They're living.
Yeah, it's a chronic disease as opposed to
a death sentence.
Yeah.
And so, to me, that's what your country needs to do about GBV.
Yeah.
I think
put the dollars and
the resources behind it and admit to what it is. It's an epidemic. You have the highest cases of GBV in the world. You have the highest Gini coefficient, which is inequality in the world, and you have one of the highest unemployment rates in the world.
And one of the worst mathematics and science scores in the world in schools.
You're second to last in
insane.
science and last in math.
So, I mean, these issues you're raising here are dangers to our future as a nation, as 100%. A country, and we need to deal with them. Gender-based violence, as you know, we do a lot of work in GBV, and our work is in prevention. The fact that we have a victim of GBV is an absolute atrocity, and so we need to do everything we can to prevent that from happening. And because the vast majority of perpetrators are male, we work with men to equip and train men to be good men who never ever, it goes back to what we were talking about, power. Power is a neutral thing, isn't it? Power's not good or bad. Power, whether it's good or bad, depends on the person utilizing it. Nuclear power can destroy a nation. It can also fund a nation in terms of light it up. And our influence and our ability is a sacred responsibility to use well. And masculine strength is exactly the same. Masculine competitiveness, masculine hormonal drive, those are the sacred responsibilities to be used well. And every single woman and child should be safe in the presence of a man. And our belief very much is if we could fix men and heal men and get them to use their strength only for good, we wouldn't need a police force, would we? Because men would be safe, and that's our passionate desire. Our goal is to turn South Africa around, the men of South Africa around, so that we become known for the goodness of our men. Right now, we're known for how dangerous our men are, but let our men become good. So it's wonderful to work with you in this. And as you said earlier, it takes partnerships, doesn't it? It takes working together. I mean, you can bring what I can't bring. I can bring what you can't.
100%.
And together we can bring so much more than each individual can. So,
Absolutely.
So, I mean, a heartfelt thank you for being an American who's making a difference on the southern tip of the African continent. It's really wonderful to see. The schools, just to tell a story about one of the schools that we continued working with after you, in between the sessions we do with you. I was talking to one of the teachers, their head of department, and he said they had one of the incidents they had in the school was one of the young boys was constantly witnessing his mother constantly be beaten by his father, to the extent it got so bad that he actually, as a young student in the school, stabbed his father.
Wow.
And that's the kind of thing that happens. This kind of thing perpetuates itself, doesn't it? It becomes a cyclical, generational thing. And
100%.
we got to jump in. And I think education and empowerment is what you're doing is just such a crucial part of it.
100%. 100%. If, like I said before, if all of us, and it does take a village, if all of us don't stand up and call it out like it is, right? And address it and do what we can about it, this country, this beautiful country, and that's the thing, this is an extraordinary country. I come to South Africa not just for my work, I come also to enjoy the wonders of this country. There's really nothing like it. But these social ills are going to destroy it. And, yesterday was Mandela Day. How are we ever going to envision the future that this man wanted for his country? How are we ever going to envision and make up for the sacrifice that what he went through, not only for South Africans, but, as you know, quite a few Americans feel global impact, right? Yeah. Of his life, if we don't address these issues. How is it possible, literally, to walk through life knowing that the average South African child is going to be born in poverty and die in poverty? How is that possible?
Malaak, to that point, we have a lady who helps us with our housekeeping and cleaning, and she's just over 40 years old. She has a daughter who's just over 20. And I look at this lady, her name's Cynthia, a gifted, beautiful woman. She now has the intellect and the ability to have been doctor, scientist, but never the opportunity. Her daughter is even worse off than her. 23, unemployed. A very, very poor standard of education, even though she finished the schooling system. And the tragedy of that, of so many young kids, adults who were born in South Africa 20, 25 years ago, who had the potential to be world changers, scientists, who are now unemployed, uneducated, undereducated. And I think this is what your organization is, a danger to that danger.
Can I address one other thing that as an American is hard for me to wrap my brain around? It's hard for me to wrap my brain around when you actually do get an opportunity to get a job in this country, right? When you're Black and you're poor. The wages. The fact that South African companies pay the majority of Black people wages that don't allow them to ever leave the community that they were born in, I think is just abysmal. The fact that majority of South Africans use 60, 70% of their money to get transport to go to work, I think is abysmal.
It's a snare, a trap, isn't it?
It's a trap. And so imagine getting up every single day, taking hours to get to work, and you know that you still cannot leave the dangerous community that you live in.
You're stuck.
I come to South Africa. I usually stay at the same hotel because they take good care of me. It's safe. My kids grew up in this hotel. And when they see me, first of all, I think it's been so many years, it's been 20 years, they're just happy to see me. But they also know that I'm going to tip them the way I'm going to tip a doorman in New York City at the Plaza Hotel or at the Four Seasons. I'm going to tip them the same. I'm not going to look at you and say, you're Black, you're poor, you live in South Africa, so I'm not going to give you what I would give a white porter in New York City. Right? When I sign my tip on my restaurant bill, I'm going to tip you the same thing I would have tipped you when I was in New York City. But unbeknownst to me, these people over the years have told me, Malaak, when you stay in our hotel for 1 week, you tip us more than we make in 1 month. What kind of nonsense is that?
Yeah.
What kind of nonsense is that? So come on, South African companies.
Step up.
Step up. You have to be a part of this change. Don't allow people to get up every single day and go to work and go back to deep slit.
Right.
I mean, that's insanity.
We've got to break the cycle.
It's just this perpetual cycle.
Yeah, which is impossible to break out of. That's why so many poor communities stay poor. So many people, because there's just no upward mobility in terms of getting out of it. And that's what we're fighting for, Malaak. That's what. How many times have you been to South Africa?
I believe this was my 43rd or my 44th time.
Wow, it's fantastic.
I count, and then when I was on the plane this time, I was like, Malaak, is it 43 or is it 44? but it's something.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So it really is second home. Huh?
It is a second home.
Okay. Well, we're very grateful for you and the work that you do here. And thank you. And I don't have to say keep coming back. You will.
I will keep coming back. And you hear that I'm passionate. But I also like to tell people this all the time. South Africa it has defined my life and given me back way more gifts than I could ever give the country. Yeah. I tell people all the time, I need South Africa more than South Africa needs me. It's a beautiful country. And if I can do anything to help reach its full potential through the work that I do with children, fantastic. Well then, we're both blessed.
Yeah. I think I can officially declare you, Malaak, dangerous but good. So thank you.
Okay,
keep growing your power, your danger, and keep being a dangerous to what's a danger to our nation.
Thank you so much.
And the US. And thank you for loving us so much. And I hope we love you back just as much. And I think you feel the love, don't you?
I do.
When you come here.
I do.
That last point you made is so powerful. We can't outgive, can we? The more you give, the more you receive. The more you sow, 100%. The more you reap. And in being good, so much good comes back to you.
100%.
In teaching, you learn so much. In giving, you receive so much. And
100%.
I think those of us involved in philanthropy know that very well. So people who don't add value, they're far poorer for it. The world's poorer for it, but they're also poorer for it. Yeah. Any final words you want to share with us before you?
I thank you for having me on your show, and I look forward to continuing to collaborate. When we walked into the podcast today, we talked about the dangerous good that we did a couple of days ago at our Gender Equality and Empowerment panel, and what we're going to do even better next year.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking forward.
Awesome. Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great talking to you.